There are places on Earth where the ground only pretends to be solid until it swallows you. Surfaces that look firm but hide a shifting liquid void that changes shape every single day. Swamps that open, close, and consume anything that falls into them without leaving a trace. What is truly remarkable is not the landscape, but the fact that entire communities live within these territories, something we rarely stop to imagine. Communities that know when the ground is about to give way, which patches of water hide treacherous currents, and how to move without sinking in an environment that offers no second chances. Today you will discover how these deceptive swamps work, what dangers lie beneath their surface, and how 5 cultures have managed to survive in places where almost nothing remains stable. Before we continue, subscribe to CronoPlanet to explore the most remote and extreme places on Earth with us. And stay until the end, because each swamp reveals a different challenge, and all of them share a truth that pushes our limits. Understanding the terrain is the only way to stay alive. To understand what you're about to see, you just need to know what makes a swamp truly dangerous. Not all swamps are the same. Some are flooded forests, like those in the Amazon, where trees spend months with their roots underwater. Others are river marshes, like those of Mesopotamia, where waterways appear and disappear with the seasons. There are also swamp lakes, such as Ganvié and coastal mangroves, where sea and river merge without a clear boundary. They all share one thing. They are living landscapes, constantly shifting. It isn't just the water. It's the combination of permanent moisture, deep mud, hidden roots, and a ground that never keeps the same shape. In these ecosystems, one step too far can sink you to the waist. One step too short can trap you in mud so dense that strength alone is useless. Faced with such a landscape, only one question remains. What is the safe step when none of them seems safe? This journey will show you how these cultures find the answer. Stagnant water attracts insects capable of transmitting disease, and visibility is almost always close to zero. What moves beneath the surface is rarely seen in time. Here, orientation doesn't rely on paths, but on the sound of the wind, the smell of vegetation, and the behavior of animals. It's an unstable, shifting, and above all, unpredictable world. Get ready, because our journey begins in a place that breaks every frame of reference. A world where forest and water blend until the boundary between ground and emptiness disappears. There lives a people who do not avoid the swamp. They embrace it as part of themselves. 1. Nukak Maku, Amazon, Colombia. The forest where the ground disappears deep in the Colombian Amazon lies a territory where geography never rests. Rain reshapes the landscape every single day, and what looks like a solid trail today may turn into a corridor of dark water tomorrow. This is home to the Nukak Maku, one of the last nomadic peoples of South America, adapted to an environment where the ground can shift its form without warning. The wetlands they inhabit belong to 2 unique ecosystems. The Várzea, flooded by sediment-rich whitewater rivers, and the Igapo, where black water rises slowly until it covers tree roots for months at a time. During the rainy season, the forest turns into a mosaic of temporary islands. Trees rise like columns in the middle of a brown ocean. Water depth changes unpredictably, and the ground, although it looks firm, is made of decomposed leaves, interwoven roots, and thick mud that gives way under a person's weight. The Nukak are constantly on the move, because staying too long in one place means risking being trapped by rising waters. Their camps are extremely lightweight. Palm leaf roofs, minimal structures, and raised platforms to keep water or animals from reaching their resting area. Every decision depends on the state of the swamp. They choose their routes according to water levels, the ripening of wild fruits, and the behavior of animals. They are experts at reading the forest, the sound of a branch snapping, the smell of humid wind, the sudden flight of birds fleeing rising water. The Nukak use blowguns with darts coated in curare, a plant-based poison extracted from Amazonian vines. The animals they hunt, monkeys, birds, small mammals, move across flooded branches, natural platforms formed by vegetation, and areas where water hides both predator and prey. The hunter must move without breaking the surface of the mud. A deep footprint attracts mosquitoes, wasps, and fish sensitive to vibrations. For most of us, moving through this environment would be impossible. They, however, know exactly which routes can be stepped on and which conceal empty pockets. During major floods, the Nukak travel in small dugout canoes carved from a single tree trunk. But the challenge is not navigation. It is interpreting the water. Whitewater currents move fast and carry enormous logs. Black water looks calm but hides slow whirlpools that can spin a canoe without warning. Some areas have so much floating vegetation that they form moving islands that block the way. The canoe must be guided by intuition. Beneath the surface, there may be sharp roots or aquatic snakes seeking warmth. The Nukak do not build large villages. They move in small groups of 15 to 35 people, following seasonal routes shaped by the rhythm of the flooded forest. Their language belongs to the Kakua Nukak family, one of the least documented and least known on the continent. This social structure allows them to survive in a landscape that demands mobility, silence, and an impeccable reading of the environment. In an Amazonian swamp, a large group would be too visible, too slow, and too vulnerable. Beyond hunting, they gather fruits that grow on trees, with roots submerged for months. No fixed crops can survive here. The swamp shifts the soil, sinks it, rearranges it, and mixes it with sediments each season. This is why their life depends on wild plants such as mocambo, a relative of cacao, chontaduro, flood-resistant palms, and edible roots that only they know how to locate without sinking into the mud. They also gather honey, climbing trees while water reaches their chest, an image that reveals how intimate their relationship with the flooded forest truly is. What for us would be an inaccessible world is, for them, a map full of signs. The color of the water, the height of fungi on the trunks, the presence of certain insects, the calls of amphibians announcing rain or drought. This is why their greatest tool is not strength, but mobility. Could you live in a place where your home lasts only a few days? Where paths disappear under the water, and where survival depends on interpreting a landscape that never stops moving? For the Nukak, this way of life is not an extreme choice. It is an inheritance from their ancestors. But today, the greatest danger they face no longer comes from the swamp. It comes from outside. For decades, their territory has been crossed by armed groups, illicit crops, and diseases for which they had no immunity. Many have been forced to leave the flooded forest and relocated to the outskirts of towns like San Jose del Guaviare, far from the environment that shaped their worldview. Let's move forward. We now enter a wetland that defies all logic. a territory where the swamp not only sustains life, it protects, conceals, and shapes the peoples who have depended on it for centuries. 2. Marsh Arabs. Mesopotamia, Iraq. The people who built their world from reeds and water. In southern Iraq lies a landscape that seems almost impossible. An immense expanse of channels, wide stretches of water and reeds, forming one of the oldest wetlands on the planet. These are the Mesopotamian marshes, a territory so vast and changeable that for centuries it offered refuge, food, and protection to those who learned how to read it. This is where the Marsh Arabs live, a people who not only inhabit the swamp, but turned it into the absolute foundation of their culture. These marshes are part of a landscape that, for millennia, existed alongside some of the first cities in human history. Today, they are recognized as a World Heritage Site and represent one of the few places where we can still sense how the earliest urban settlements interacted with a great wetland. At first glance, this aquatic world looks chaotic. Water covers almost the entire horizon, channels open and close with the seasons, and vegetation grows so quickly that the terrain changes in a matter of days. In times of abundance, reeds reach impressive heights, forming natural corridors that act as living walls. When the water level drops, the marsh uncovers stretches of deep mud where a single wrong step can turn into a trap. Those who live here have developed precise ways to survive within this instability. Their architecture is among the most remarkable in the world. While other cultures depended on stone or timber, these communities raised monumental structures built entirely from reeds. The mud heath, their traditional guest houses, are constructed by driving massive bundles of reeds into the mud and bending them to form a curved roof that seems to defy logic. No nails, no metal. Everything is held together with plant fibers and a building technique passed down through generations. A mud heath is not just a house. It is a social space, a gathering place, and a symbol of identity. The structure breathes with the wind, adapts to the humidity, and can be rebuilt in a matter of days if a flood damages it. In a territory where nothing is permanent, they learn to build in a way that does not aspire to permanence either, but to function. To move through narrow channels and natural corridors, they use long, slender boats called mashuf. Without these craft, the marsh would be impassable. The inhabitants of the marshes navigate with extraordinary precision. They know which zones hide snakes seeking warmth, which waters accumulate toxic mud, and which remain cold enough to preserve fish. For them, every variation in the water carries meaning. Water buffalo are another essential element. These animals can move through areas where a person would sink, and their instinct helps them sense dangerous parts of the marsh. Families rely on them for milk, work, and for maintaining a vital link with the patches of firm ground they barely see. Watching a buffalo submerged up to its neck captures the relationship between humans and this wetland. Coexistence, not conquest. Survival here depends on interpreting the ecosystem's constant shifts. Fishing is essential, but not just any fishing. They must anticipate how fish will behave according to temperature, depth, and current. When waters warm, fish change their routes. When levels drop, the species present change as well. This knowledge does not come from books or maps. It is inherited by observing a landscape that is never the same twice. But the history of the Marsh Arabs is also a story of resistance. In the 1990s, the marshes were deliberately drained, reducing a millennia-old ecosystem to a fraction of its size. What had once been a world of water became a cracked desert. Many communities were forced to leave the marsh, others disappeared without a trace. It was one of the most drastic, human-driven environmental transformations in recent times. When the regime fell and channels were reopened, the water slowly returned, and with it, some of the communities that had managed to survive away from their homeland. They rebuilt their mud heath, brought buffalo back into the marsh, and restored navigable waterways. The landscape is still not what it once was, but their culture continues to fight to stand its ground. Beyond its historical importance, this wetland is a crucial refuge for migratory birds, fish, and dozens of species that depend on shallow waters. It acts as a natural filter, stores fresh water, and softens the impact of droughts and extreme heat. Protecting this marsh also means preserving one of the last great living ecosystems of the Middle East. Living here is neither a romantic gesture nor a simple adaptation to nature. It is an extreme demonstration of how a people can integrate into an environment that offers no certainties. Where others see limits, they see clues. Where someone sees a hostile swamp, they recognize a territory that speaks, that warns, and that protects if you know how to listen. After Mesopotamia, our journey pulls us toward a swamp in West Africa where nature was not the main danger. Humans were. An entire community raised its city above the water simply to stay alive. Every platform, every home, and every post driven into the mud was a silent declaration of survival. 3. Tofinu, Benin, the city that rose above the swamp to survive. In southern Benin, where the land stops being firm and a brackish lagoon stretches out like a motionless mirror, there is a place that defies logic. Ganvié, an entire city built on water. At first glance, it looks like an impossible postcard. As you get closer, you realize it was born from one urgent need: to stay alive. The inhabitants of this floating city, the Tofinu, did not come here by choice. They came fleeing. In the 16th and 17th centuries, the kingdom of Dahomey captured people to sell them as slaves to European traders. Those who lived on solid ground lived in fear. Those who moved away from the marsh knew they might never return. But one rule changed their fate. Dahomey warriors avoided entering deep water. This prohibition was not only tactical, it was tied to religious beliefs that considered these waters the domain of spirits and deities. That mixture of fear, myth, and strategy opened a way out for those seeking refuge. And that escape gave rise to a city that, centuries later, is still standing. Imagine the decision: to abandon your home, push into a swamp with no solid ground, and stake your survival on a terrain that could swallow you in seconds. They did it anyway. And on that unstable mud, they built a place that would become their refuge. Ganvier rests on wooden posts driven into thick, shifting mud. Beneath the water, there are no solid foundations, only layers of sediment and roots that appear or vanish with the seasons. Even so, the houses remain standing thanks to knowledge accumulated over generations. Each structure is inspected, renewed, and adjusted according to water level, salinity, and the changing consistency of the marsh. Here, water is everything: road, square, border, and meeting point. To go to the market, you travel by boat. To reach the school, you travel by boat. To visit a friend, you do the same. Children learn to paddle almost before they learn to walk. They grow up without streets, without sidewalks, and without the idea that land is something you own. In this city, a canoe is the closest thing to our steps on solid ground. Fishing sustains daily life, but here, a net is not enough. The murky water hides the bottom, forcing people to rely on techniques refined over centuries. Stake traps, aquatic enclosures, and nets set at strategic points according to fish behavior. The lake decides where and when fishing is possible. The Tofinu respond with almost perfect precision. Yet this swamp also hides a silent enemy. Water hyacinth, an invasive plant that blocks roots and suffocates the ecosystem. Many communities would have abandoned the area when faced with such a threat. The people of Ganvier instead learned to fight it by pulling it out by hand, building natural barriers, and even using it for agriculture and handicrafts. Here, every threat is turned into a possibility. Today, tens of thousands of people depend on this lake and its intricate network of houses raised on stilts. But the balance is fragile. Demographic pressure, pollution, overfishing, and a growing tourist presence put constant strain on a system designed for fewer bodies and less noise. The marsh is still a refuge, but each season demands more effort to hold it together. Ganvier is not an improvised city. It has markets, schools, temples, and floating shops. It is a powerful reminder. Human ingenuity does not depend on the environment it receives, but on how it chooses to adapt to it. Every house, every platform, and every boat tells the same story. Choosing water was the only way to stay alive. That decision lives on in every paddle stroke that cuts the surface, in every home raised above the mud, and in every narrow canal where canoes glide by. Ganvier is more than a refuge. It is proof that an impossible landscape can become home. If this journey is showing you the world with new eyes, you can subscribe and become part of this community that keeps seeking stories that deserve to be told. Stay tuned. What comes next demands a new way of understanding territory. We leave the brackish marsh behind and enter a realm of deep roots, unpredictable currents, and mangroves that seem to close in as you move forward. There, a community has turned movement into instinct for Moken, Myanmar, Thailand. The people who turned the mangrove into a refuge. Along the coasts of the Andaman Sea, where solid ground dissolves into a maze of submerged roots and narrow channels, live the Moken, a nomadic people whose existence is tied to the constant movement of the water. For them, the mangrove is neither a border nor an obstacle. It is home, pathway, and protection. This ecosystem is one of the most complex on the planet. The ground is an unstable mix of deep mud, interlaced roots, and zones where the tide can rise faster than a person can react. The surface looks calm, but it hides irregular currents that change direction without warning. A miscalculated step can mean getting stuck in dense mud that closes around the body like a trap. And yet, those who live here move with the confidence of someone reading a living map. They do not advance blindly. They read the smell of the water, the sound of crabs among the roots, and the color of the mud to anticipate the tide. Their way of understanding the environment is completely different from ours. For this community, nature is not a backdrop. It is a language. One of their most striking adaptations is their navigation. From a young age, they learn to handle kabang boats, traditional vessels carved from a single trunk. They are not just boats. They are mobile homes. Many families spend entire months living on these craft, moving between islands, mangroves, and reefs according to the season. Each kabang is unique, handmade and adapted to the needs of each group. Children grow up surrounded by water. Even before they can read, they know how to dive. Physiological studies have shown that, with training, they can adjust the lens and pupil of the eye to see more clearly underwater than most humans. This ability allows them to detect shellfish, fish, and dangers in environments where visibility is usually almost zero. The mangrove is also a territory of unpredictable tides. When the water rises, it can trap anyone caught inside. When it falls, it reveals sharp roots, mud banks, and channels that close in seconds. Here, every movement requires absolute precision. They recognize when a passage will narrow, which trunks can bear weight, and which areas, despite seeming solid, can become a trap. Their diet depends on the balance between the sea and the swamp. They gather shellfish, fish with spears or nets, and take advantage of whatever the tide leaves behind. Nothing is improvised. Every action follows patterns passed down through generations. Each time of year brings a different movement. But this people's relationship with water goes far beyond survival. Historically, they were almost entirely nomadic. Their identity was shaped by constant movement. In recent decades, however, different policies have tried to settle them on land, restrict their mobility, and integrate them into systems that do not belong to their tradition. This has reduced part of their way of life, although many families remain attached to the freedom of the sea, holding on in small communities scattered among the mangroves. In some cases, they have been offered houses on land in exchange for giving up their boats. For many, that does not just mean losing a home. It means losing the very foundation of their identity. What would it be like to grow up in a place where the ground is made of roots and mud, where your house moves with every wave, and your safety depends on reading a constantly shifting current? That is daily life in this landscape. Fragile, yet deeply free. Their bond with the sea became even clearer in 2004. When the ocean began to recede abnormally, the stories passed down by their elders suddenly made sense. Tales of a great wave that arrived after the sea breathed backwards. While others approached the shore to watch, these communities moved toward higher ground. When the tsunami struck the Indian Ocean, many of them survived thanks to that oral memory and to their ability to read signs that went unnoticed by others. And as we follow their way of life, an inevitable question arises. What does a culture lose when it is separated from the landscape that gave it identity? With that thought still present, we enter the final stretch of the journey. A stretch that may change the way you understand life on the water. We leave the Southeast Asian mangrove behind and head toward another people of the sea, one that has taken this relationship to the limit. They do not only sail, they have built their entire existence on the ocean, in villages raised on stilts that defy stability and time. They are the Bajau Laut, the final chapter in this journey through the most unstable wetlands and swamps on the planet. 5. Bajau Laut, Philippines, Malaysia. Life suspended above a sea that never stops in the shallow waters of Southeast Asia. There is a people whose life challenges everything we usually associate with stability. From a distance, their villages seem to float in perfect calm. But that image is an illusion. Beneath their feet, the seafloor changes every day, and the line that separates home from the abyss shifts with every tide. Their houses stand on stilts, driven into a seabed that never stays the same. The bottom is a living mix of mud, sand, and coral remains that slowly shift and reshape, erasing roots, sinking structures, and forcing people to rebuild with a patience that few would be able to maintain. Seen from the outside, these homes look fragile. From the inside, they are masterpieces raised over a landscape that does not forgive mistakes. Those who are born here grow up above the water. For them, walking on solid ground is almost as strange as it would be for us to live on a platform that never stops swaying. Their lives unfold between narrow boats, elevated planks, and structures that move to the rhythm of the waves. While most people seek stability, they rely on structures that adapt just as the sea does. One of their most remarkable adaptations is their ability to free dive. It is not a casual talent or a recent skill. It is the result of centuries devoted to underwater fishing. Comparative research has found that many people in these communities have a slightly larger spleen, which allows them to store more oxygen and endure prolonged dives. They can stay underwater for minutes at a time, reach depths that most would not tolerate without equipment, and orient themselves in murky waters where mud and shadow blend together. In that environment, distinguishing between a rock and the body of a fish is a matter of millimeters and of experience handed down from generation to generation. An outside observer might think this is a gift. For them, it is survival. Their bodies, their breathing, and their rhythm are calibrated by the sea. Yet this environment demands constant attention. Storms can destroy houses in a few hours. High tides can rip entire platforms away. Sudden currents can drag off anyone who fails to anticipate the change. Watching the horizon is not a habit. It is a necessity. Every variation in the color of the water or the wind is a message they must read in time. Their traditional boats are an extension of the body. Children learn to paddle even before they can walk with confidence. From an early age, they memorize routes that change with the seasons, recognize the sound of the sea when it announces danger, and understand that a miscalculation can carry a boat beyond any possible return. However, the deepest challenge does not come from the sea but from the land. In recent decades, pressure to settle has forced many families to abandon their nomadic life. With every family that leaves the water, a fragment of the knowledge that sustained this culture for centuries is lost. Diving hours are reduced, techniques are forgotten, and an adaptation born from movement alone begins to weaken. And a question arises, heavier than any wave. What remains of a people once they are separated from the landscape that shaped them? For those who live here, the sea is not a poetic symbol. It is a changing environment where only those who know how to read it can thrive. After traveling through flooded forests, ancient marshes, floating cities, and labyrinthine mangroves, one clear truth emerges. None of these cultures survived because their environment was easy, but because they learned how to read it. In Nukak territory, the ground disappears and returns. In Mesopotamia, canals change in a matter of days. In Ganvié, the mud keeps the memory of those who fled to save their lives. In the mangroves, orientation depends on unseen signals. And in this sea, what holds a house today may sink tomorrow. 5 different territories, 5 different kinds of risk, one single lesson. What destroys is not the shifting land, but the inability to understand it. And they all share another threat. The Amazon is losing wetlands. The marshes of Iraq depend on a fragile balance. Ganvier struggles against invasive water hyacinth. Mangroves are retreating, and the sea peoples are trying to preserve a nomadic life that the modern world wants to pin down. When a territory disappears, it is not only a landscape that vanishes. A way of thinking is lost, a way of reading the world, a way of surviving where nothing stays the same. These cultures have known this for centuries. They survive because they move with their environment. The question is whether we will be able to do the same when change finally reaches us. What do you think? Thank you for joining us on this journey through some of the most unsettling wetlands on the planet. If you feel this documentary has opened up new questions and you want to keep exploring cultures and territories that almost never appear on the map, you can subscribe to CronoPlanet so you don't miss the next documentaries. Here you'll find truly immersive journeys. Forbidden islands, sacred mountains, deserts that hide untold stories, and jungles where time seems to stand still. Leave us the keyword swamp in the comments. That way we'll know you made it to the end, and that you're part of this community that enjoys pushing the limits of our world. See you on the next journey.